Hey, Grandma. Want to play Scrabble?
I couldn't hide my surprise at the unexpected invitation. It had been years since I played Scrabble. I only played a few times when my granddaughter Emma was still young. Would she still want to play as a high school student? Emma looked at me with a worried expression. When I agreed to Emma's invitation, her expression softened slightly. After setting up the board, Emma picked up the tiles.
How about we don't pick randomly at first and instead choose our favorite letters?
Perhaps she considered my age. I thought the novel rule was interesting. And so, our Scrabble game between just the two of us began. We took turns creating words. When each of us had 4 words, Emma stopped picking tiles. Curious, I looked at Emma's face. Emma stared at the remaining tiles with a serious expression. Then, she pointed to each tile, one by one. As if she were trying to tell me something. S-O-L-D. At first, I didn't understand, but when I noticed Emma looking alternately at the cards and her mother Amy, my blood ran cold. Sold. A few days later, at 5 p.m. My eyes were dazzled by the sparkling signs. It was the place Emma had secretly told me about via email.
Sorry, Mom. Looks like I won't be able to make it back there again this year.
I sighed at the phone call from my son, John. It was the 6th summer since John and my granddaughter Emma left this house. I wonder how long it's been since I've seen Emma's face. We've been in touch through phone calls and emails, but even those communications have been dwindling this year. Well, everyone's busy, it can't be helped. I put on a cheerful voice, trying not to show my loneliness. John kept apologizing until the end, then hung up, seeming apologetic. Looking around, the house felt strangely spacious, even though it was the same as always. I felt like my emotions were about to overwhelm me. Before that happened, I stood up and started preparing to go shopping. I'm Nancy, 65 years old. I lost my husband early on, and my only son John lived far away with his family. We used to live together with my son's family. It was John, his wife Sarah, and our granddaughter Emma living together as a family of 4. I must say, our relationship as mother-in-law and daughter-in-law was smooth. Sarah was always cheerful and bright, the kind of person who could make anyone smile. When we went shopping together, we were often mistaken for real mother and daughter because we got along so well. If it weren't for that unfortunate accident, we would still be happily living together as a family of 4. To leave this world so easily, leaving behind little Emma at just 3 years old. What a cruel. Our home lost its light after losing Sarah, becoming quiet. But, we couldn't let Emma feel lonely. John and I decided to push our loneliness aside and make sure Emma was happy. A few years later, John suddenly announced that he was getting remarried. He said he was dating someone he met through work, with marriage in mind. Apparently, the woman knew about Emma, but I wondered how Emma felt about it. At the time, Emma was 10 years old. She was old enough to understand that her father was remarrying and that the new woman wouldn't be related to her by blood. Because I prioritized Emma's feelings, I had intended to ask John to give up remarriage if Emma objected. After conveying my feelings clearly, John brought his fiancée, Amy, home. Like Sarah, she was also a cheerful person. She talked to Emma and me without any hesitation, even though we were meeting for the first time. Emma, who was usually shy, was drawn into the conversation and seemed to enjoy it. After Amy left, I asked Emma for her honest opinion.
If she becomes my mom, it seems like it'll be fun.
She said with a big smile, and I felt a wave of loneliness wash over me. But if Emma would be happy, I decided to support John's remarriage. Just then, John's transfer was decided, and they had to leave this house. On a moving day, Emma told me something.
Grandma, even though we'll be apart, I'll make sure to keep in touch so you won't feel lonely.
It seemed like Emma, who had always been with me, could see right through my loneliness. But I wouldn't worry an elementary school-aged granddaughter. I forced a smile and waved goodbye to Emma. Living alone was lonelier than I had imagined, but I tried my best not to contact them too much, thinking of Emma. When I realized I couldn't see Emma or John, memories flooded back one after another. Being immersed in memories only made the loneliness worse. I had to keep the overflowing loneliness in check, so I finished my shopping. On my way back, I locked eyes with a kitten. Perhaps it was a stray cat. Thinking that its mother must be nearby anyway, I continued walking without paying much attention, but the kitten followed me while meowing. "You should go home soon too. Your mother is waiting for you." I glanced back and spoke as I kept walking, but the kitten ended up following me to my house. In the sweltering heat, the kitten looked up at me with watery eyes. I couldn't escape that gaze. The days I spent alone suddenly changed thanks to the arrival of the kitten. Strangely, the cat didn't run away and seemed to relax as if it had been living with me for a long time. As summer came to an end and the sound of insects filled the air, I found myself unable to part from the kitten. Watching its adorable figure, I couldn't help but think of Emma when she was still small. And then, I started to worry when I didn't receive a reply to the email I sent to Emma the other day. Until she entered high school, Emma and I used to exchange personal emails and phone calls, but recently, the lack of response has been increasing. I thought maybe entering high school had changed her routine, but somehow, I had a feeling of unease. I tried calling her directly, but the ringing tone echoed emptily. I considered contacting John. But then I remembered he mentioned he was going on a business trip overseas in our last phone call. I couldn't unnecessarily worry him, and I didn't want to inconvenience Amy by calling their home. What should I do? I muttered softly to myself, and the kitten reacted. The cat, which had been lying on a cushion by the window, suddenly came up to me and looked up at me. With the same watery eyes as the day it followed me home, it seemed to be pleading with me. As I gazed into those eyes, as if they were trying to tell me something, it struck me. I would quietly go check on Emma's situation. Sensing my idea, the cat curled up on the cushion again. The city where Emma and her family lived was about a 2-hour train ride from where I was. I predicted the time Emma would come home from school and get on the train. My heart was pounding for some reason. What excuse would I make if I got caught? Should I just go and meet her normally? While pondering these thoughts, I gazed out the window at the scenery passing by. I arrived at the nearest station and checked the map. I've known where Emma's family has lived, but I've never actually been there. Feeling somewhat like a detective, I walked around while glancing around. The unfamiliar streets and the different actions from my usual routine. Before I knew it, I realized I was actually enjoying myself. I was supposed to have come to check on Emma out of concern. Tightening my resolve, I eventually reached the house where Emma and her family has lived. I passed by the house once and stopped at the nearest corner. I had come here on impulse, but now I felt a sudden panic realizing there was nowhere to hide. Though there were few people around, I couldn't keep pacing back and forth in front of the house. As I looked up at the sky, a familiar voice caught my ear. I hid behind the corner of a fence and confirmed the source of the voice. It was Amy.
Hurry up, hurry.
Amy seemed to be urging a girl to walk with her. The girl followed behind Amy, head down. They walked the same path I had taken. Were they heading to the station? Keeping a distance, I decided to follow them. It had been years since I last saw Emma. In my mind, Emma was still in elementary school. But I was convinced that the girl with Amy was Emma. Her posture, the way her hair felt, bits of her childhood were still visible. So, she's a high school student now. I knew it, but seeing my granddaughter grow up from a child to this, it truly hit home. And I realized just how much time had passed. Watching the two of them, it seemed like Amy was excited, while Emma appeared to be downcast. Despite it being almost 5 p.m., they seemed to be heading somewhere. Shopping. But their demeanor was too mismatched for it to make sense. Eventually, they went through the ticket gates at the station. I bought a ticket to make sure I wouldn't lose sight of them and headed to the platform. However, as I ascended the escalator, I heard the sound signaling the arrival of a train. Hastily making my way up, I arrived just as the train was departing. Looking around, I couldn't spot them anywhere. I had completely lost them. Feeling helpless, I decided to give up and head home. In the car on the way back, I tried to shake off the uneasy feeling by recalling Emma's grown-up appearance over and over again. Arriving home, exhausted from the unfamiliar experience, I fell asleep without eating. In my sleep, I had a dream. Emma seemed to be shouting something at me, but I couldn't hear her voice. I tried to respond to Emma, but my voice wouldn't come out. Despite screaming until my throat felt like it would tear, only hoarse whispers escaped, unable to reach Emma. It was agonizing. When I woke up, the cat was peering at my face with a worried expression. Had I been having a nightmare? I was drenched in sweat. Quickly changing clothes, I immediately sent an email to Emma. I'm worried that we haven't been in touch much since you started high school. If there's anything wrong, please let me know anytime. Surprisingly, Emma replied quickly.
We're all doing fine. I miss you too, Grandma. But I'll do my best.
If she missed me, why didn't she come to visit? Why couldn't she spare some time? Were high school students really that busy? As I pondered, I remembered Emma's lackluster face from yesterday. Emma looked downcast as she left with Amy. Unable to shake the image from my mind, I sent another email to Emma. You can come visit anytime. Or are you busy with a part-time job or club activities? I ended with a question mark to make it easier for her to reply. But I never received a response from Emma. Since then, I've found myself constantly checking my phone, hoping for a message from Emma. But it's been nothing but empty actions, as the days passed without any change. I've tried to visit a few times to see her directly, but either the timing was off or I couldn't catch sight of Emma. My chest feels like it's being crushed with anxiety and worry. Then, John called me after a long time.
Mom, how are you doing? I've finally finished up with work and returned from overseas.
Forgetting to congratulate John, I desperately pleaded. More importantly, please make sure to come home this year. My urgency seems to surprise John.
What's wrong? Did something happen?
If I were to ask John about Emma's well-being now, I knew he'd reassured me that everything was fine. Maybe my unease about Emma's condition was just a misunderstanding on my part. But if I can't talk to Emma directly, this lingering uneasiness in my chest wouldn't go away. I haven't seen everyone's faces for so many years. I'm feeling lonely. I've always kept my loneliness buried deep inside, never showing it to anyone. Lately, having the cat around has helped distract me from that loneliness, but I try to change my tone of voice a bit, making it sound a bit more staged. John has always been straightforward. Perhaps feeling guilty for leaving his aging mother alone, he promised that everyone would come home for Christmas. After hanging up the phone, the cat came over and rubbed against my legs. With a slight pang of guilt in my chest, I gently stroked the cat's head. And then Christmas arrived. I waited anxiously for John and his family to come home. The food and drinks were all prepared. And in the evening, John, Emma, and Amy arrived at our house.
Nancy, I'm sorry we haven't visited for so long.
Amy handed me a box of Christmas sweets. I'm the one who should apologize for being so selfish. We never had any bad blood between us. Whenever we met, our conversations flowed naturally. When I saw Emma's face as she entered next, tears threatened to spill from my eyes. Though I could only see her from a distance before, she had grown into such a beautiful young woman. Seeing firsthand how much Emma had grown since she left home at the age of 10 was enough to make me feel content.
Grandma, I'm sorry I couldn't reply to your emails.
I wanted to hug Emma as she apologized with her head down, but I held back. It's okay. Just seeing your happy face here makes me happy. Then I gently nudged Emma forward and urged her to enter the living room. As soon as my hand touched Emma's, she flinched slightly. In that moment of reuniting after such a long time, I wondered if I had been too familiar, but Emma didn't seem particularly conscious of it.
Oh, there's a cat. Emma, come see.
As Amy's voice echoed from the living room, Emma hurriedly walked down the hallway. While John and the others played with the cat, I prepared some tea.
I can't believe Mom has a cat now.
Come to think of it, I recalled how John had always opposed having pets whenever he mentioned wanting one in the past. As we chatted about trivial matters, I noticed Amy whispering something to Emma. Reluctantly, Amy handed her phone to Emma from her bag.
I'm going to the convenience store real quick.
With those words, Emma grabbed her phone and headed outside. Amy muttered in a voice louder than intended.
Even though we're here for a family visit.
Well, I guess it's boring for a high schooler to just sit around in the countryside. I replied, trying not to make Amy feel uncomfortable, as I set the tea on the living room table. After chatting for a while, Emma returned.
Emma, I'll hold on to your phone. Since you finally got to see Grandma after a long time, why not have a nice chat?
I was about to protest, but Emma handed her phone to Amy without any resistance. She glanced briefly at me, but as I smiled at her, she looked away. John, seemingly oblivious, chuckled while watching a TV special. However, the idea of a mother holding her high school daughter's phone felt odd. Suspicious, I pretended to prepare dinner while discreetly checking my phone. Then, I received a message from Emma.
Mom has been managing my phone, so I have very little free time to use it. That's why I couldn't reply.
Glancing at Emma, who appeared absent-minded next to John and Amy, who were watching TV and laughing, her expression was so lackluster that it seemed as if she had lost her spirit. I wondered what I could do for Emma. Perhaps managing her phone was Amy's way of parenting, and I couldn't intervene abruptly. Despite considering various options, I found myself unable to do anything as we welcomed Christmas. The next day, as we welcomed Christmas, John and Amy were drinking alcohol from the morning. Snacking on the dishes I made, it seemed like the alcohol was starting to affect them. In the midst of this, Emma approached me.
Hey, Grandma. Want to play Scrabble?
I couldn't hide my surprise at the unexpected invitation. Scrabble? It had been years since we last played. We had only played a few times when Emma was still young. Did she still want to play now that she was in high school? Emma looked at me with a hint of uncertainty. Sure. Since we don't have much else to do, let's play together. Emma's expression softened slightly when I accepted her invitation. There should be Scrabble somewhere we used in the past. I retrieved it from the closet, and we both laughed.
This brings back memories.
After setting up the board, Emma picked up the tiles.
How about we don't pick randomly at first and instead choose the letters we like?
Perhaps she considered my age. But still, would playing Scrabble with just the two of us work? With various thoughts in my mind, our Scrabble game began. We took turns creating words, and surprisingly, it was quite enjoyable. When each of us had 4 words, Emma stopped picking tiles. What's wrong? There are still some left. I looked at Emma, puzzled. She had a serious expression as she began to arrange the remaining tiles in a straight line. Then, she started pointing to each tile, as if trying to convey something. S-O-L-D. At first, I didn't understand, but when I noticed Emma alternating between looking at the tiles and Amy, my blood ran cold. Sold. Could it be that Emma? No, that couldn't be possible. That could never be allowed. But I couldn't confront Amy based solely on Emma's testimony. I whispered to Emma in a low voice. I'll definitely help you. It might take some time, but just wait for me. Emma nodded firmly, tears welling up in her eyes. A few days later, I lied to John. I told him I needed him to take the day off from work to accompany me to the hospital. Fully believing me, John came to pick me up in his car.
All right, let's go.
As I walked without getting into John's car, he followed behind me.
What's going on, Mom? Where are we going?
Until I had evidence, I shouldn't tell John the situation. It's not that I didn't trust my son, but Emma reaching out to me with an SOS might be because she didn't want to worry John. If today's surveillance goes well, it'll be quicker to explain the situation to John later. However, the shock he'll receive would be immeasurable. But, as her biological father, I wanted him to face reality. Besides, I couldn't handle anything that might happen alone. No matter what, I'll definitely help Emma. With that determination driving me, John eventually followed me without saying anything, sensing the seriousness of my demeanor. We transferred trains and arrived at the nearest station to Emma's and their town. Changing trains, John and I got off a few stations ahead. It was 5 in the evening. Dazzled by the sparkling signs, we found ourselves in the place Emma had secretly informed us about via email.
What business could we have in such a bustling district?
John seemed perplexed. However, I discreetly hid behind the building where the ticket gate was visible, and John obediently followed suit. Soon, 2 familiar figures emerged from the gate.
Huh? Amy and Emma.
John gazed at Emma, with slightly heavier makeup, and Amy, whom she was leading, with suspicion. I signaled to John, and we trailed behind them. They entered one of the mixed-use buildings, and we followed suit. The elevator stopped at the 4th floor. Checking the sign, the store name was written in Japanese.
Why would she bring Emma to a bar like this?
It seemed doubt towards Amy had begun to sprout in John's mind. I'm going in, John, I said as we stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the 4th floor. It seemed like the place was a members-only bar, as we were stopped by the man at the entrance. Oh, sorry about that. I feigned confusion and pushed my way into the establishment.
Excuse us. Didn't hear that my dad went in here. We'll get him out right away.
John, bowing apologetically, followed me, causing the man to fluster at dealing with the doddering act. Good thing he wasn't a tough one. I thought to myself as I scanned the dimly lit interior, noticing a stage in the back. Bathed in the spotlight, young girls in revealing attire struck poses while the male patrons snapped photos of them.
What is this place?
John muttered as we stood there dumbfounded.
Hey, mister. Don't just stand there gawking. Order something or move along.
A waiter snapped us out of our trance. The waiter approached, and I was startled. Excuse me. It seems my husband is here.
Sorry, she's just a little forgetful. We'll be leaving soon.
As we exchanged those words, the lighting and the music in the room changed. When I looked back at the stage, I saw a familiar girl this time. I wondered when she had changed her outfit. Wearing a nurse's uniform with a plunging neckline and a skirt so short that her underwear could be seen, unmistakably, it was Emma. Cheers erupted from the men, and flashes from cameras filled the air. Amidst all that, her face showed clear signs of discomfort. What is this? Anger trembled through my body. John, too, gritted his teeth in frustration. But we couldn't contain those emotions. Straightening my back, I stormed onto the stage, grabbed Emma's hand, and headed towards the exit of the store. The customers were taken aback by the sudden intruder.
Hey, you can't do that, ma'am.
The waiter forcefully restrained me. Then John, who had remained silent, spoke up.
This is clearly a brothel, but are you employing high school students here?
The waiter's demeanor shifted.
I work in legal affairs, you see. I have plenty of acquaintances in the police force.
John continued. The hand restraining me loosened.
This girl is my daughter. You are having fun, aren't you? Should I sue every customer here?
John's voice reverberated throughout the store. One by one, male customers began fleeing the establishment. In the midst of this, Amy emerged from the back of the shop.
Oh well, it was such a lucrative gig,
she said lazily, cigarette dangling from her lips. She sounded indifferent, a stark contrast to her usual lively self. However, I couldn't be deterred by such things. This is no way to treat high school students. I glared at Amy, but she just smirked and chuckled dismissively.
It's just a part-time job, isn't it?
There wasn't a trace of remorse in her demeanor. Suddenly, Emma, trembling in John's coat and arms, stood up and shouted.
It's not just a job. You were taking all the money, weren't you? I never received a single penny.
With tears in her eyes, Emma glared at Amy.
What's going on, Amy?
Placing a hand on Emma's shoulder, John calmly inquired. He seemed unable to believe that his wife could exploit their daughter. His voice sounded like he was seeking some last shred of redemption. But Amy further trampled on John's feelings.
Even Emma enjoyed being looked at by men older than you, right?
I felt like my head might explode. Just as I was about to lunge at her, John stepped in front of me and declared to Amy,
"We're getting a divorce."
He then urged Emma and me to leave, and we exited the shop. As we walked away from the store, Amy watched us with a smile, but there was a faint twist to her lips. I made Emma a hot milk with plenty of honey as she returned to my house. Somehow, the cat had curled up next to Emma. With the warmth of the hot milk and the cat, Emma seemed to relax.
Thank you, Grandma.
Emma, who had been forcing a smile, eventually broke down in tears as if a dam had burst. I hugged her tightly, gently rubbing her back. And so the night grew late. A few days later, John packed up his and Emma's belongings and moved into my house. Surprisingly, despite appearing relaxed at the time, Amy was reluctant to divorce. She repeatedly called our house, saying things like,
I was just tempted by the easy money. I'll change my ways from now on, so please forgive me.
Appealing to me and John, but she never apologized to Emma. Most likely, she was being manipulated by the owner of that establishment. Neither John nor I paid her any attention. Eventually, through a lawyer acquaintance of John's, their divorce was finalized. It seems Amy had been arranging other girls besides Emma at that brothel. She's facing charges not just from us but also from other girls and their parents for coercion into unsuitable work for high school girls. All of this is what we heard from the lawyer. More than anything else, I'm concerned about Emma's emotional wounds. Though her expressions had become more varied over time, I wondered if she was truly okay. One evening, as usual, Emma came home from school and brought out Scrabble. Just like before, she wanted to play Scrabble together. Perhaps she had something else she wanted to communicate. Once again, we chose her favorite tiles first, and the game began. Then, 7 words were formed. Emma silently lined up the tiles. I followed each tile with my eyes. A, L, R, I, G, H, T. When I looked at Emma's face, there was the same smile as when she was a child. A tear streamed down my cheek. The cat, watching us from nearby, began playing with the leftover tiles. Emma and I laughed together at the cat's antics, surprised but amused. From then on, whenever something happened, we played word games with Scrabble. The cat, now grown, watched over us from a distance.